There's a man who visits town once a year. No one knows where he comes from. No one ever sees him arrive. No one ever sees him leave. But every summer without fail, just after midnight in the muggy August heat, he appears, under a starless, inky black sky. He sits behind a small wooden booth at the edge of the old highway displaying a sign boasting, "Second chances, fair prices." I'd never deigned to visit the rickety, carnival-esque stand that promised a different future. It was meant for those who regret. This isn't to say I didn't have more than a few choices in life I saw as being worthy of second-guessing. But there was nothing that I looked upon with reproach. There was no desperate need for repentance that bubbled deep within my gut. No desire to visit the man who sold second chances. But in late March, when the first signs of sweetness from blooming magnolia trees tinged the air, a decision settled itself so deeply in the recesses of my consciousness that every moment was filled with a cold, merciless weight refusing to settle in my chest. Pangs of guilt ricocheted wildly against my ribcage, rebounding off of bone like a ball-peen hammer on steel, with each impact leaving a sharp, ringing ache that built an unbearable pressure in my sternum. But I deserved these inescapable feelings. I deserved to have been granted this ceaseless collision of regret and remorse, leaving behind the unbearable knowledge that the past cannot be undone. It was such a simple favor, a text reading, "Can you come pick me up? I've got a weird feeling and I don't feel safe walking anymore." Followed by 3 missed calls. Then the frantic voicemail, "Seriously, please pick up, I think this guy is following me." Another missed call. Then radio silence. I noticed all of this at just past 1 in the morning. The messages and calls had been left in succession. 11:42 p.m., 11:47 p.m., 11:53 p.m., 11:54 p.m. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I had silenced my phone because I was studying. And as soon as I saw how serious things seemed to be, why Emily had tried to contact me so many times, I called back. No answer. I ran to my car, panic-stricken and feverishly dialing and redialing her number. I knew where she had been and the route she would have taken to get home. But no matter how many times I retraced the steps my friend would have taken just an hour ago, the street remained empty. It's June now and the search for Emily has fizzled out. The police have resigned to the belief that she is dead, and if nothing has been discovered at this point, a body will likely never be found. The case files will sit in a cardboard box gathering dust, unsolved, scrawled in block letters across its front. Silencing my phone that night isn't the decision that carried so much shame. No, the shame stemmed from a decision I had made after that. Amongst the string of texts and missed calls, there was a piece of evidence that condemned me to this misery, a single message that led me to the man who sold second chances. Read 11:43 p.m. Blank. The sickly sweet smell of magnolia heavily perfumed the air. It's August and their blossoms have almost all but disappeared from their spindly perches in the trees, littering the ground with rotting corpse petals that signal the end of summer. But the stench that lingered on the breeze brought with it a reminder. Soon, a makeshift booth would be constructed on the edge of town, and soon I'd be given the opportunity to pick up my phone. The opportunity to live the rest of my life without having to stare at that last text. Listen to that voicemail. The opportunity to hear more in my friend's voice than fear. And so I waited. There was no set date for when the man would appear to construct his booth. But there were signs to look for. There would be no stars and the night sky would be a deep void of blackness, without even the subtle glow of the moon to offer any reprieve. People in town said these astrological anomalies happened because all the possibilities of all the second chances needed to be the only thing people looked towards. I don't know how much I believed this superstition, but I did believe in the man. I believed in what he offered. And finally, the night came. It was August 19th when I looked up and noticed that there was no light to be found. Heaven was no longer the thing providing a path forward. The man who sold second chances had come to town. I got in my car and drove to where the main thoroughfare in town branched off into a few side streets, one of which eventually turned into the worn road that was now the old highway. Once I came across it, I parked my car and started to walk. I didn't know how far I'd need to go, but I knew to trust the path that I was on. The minutes ticked by and I kept walking, and doubt started to creep into the edges of my mind. And then, there he was. He wasn't as odd as I thought he would be. He looked pretty normal? Maybe normal isn't the right word, but unassuming? He wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. He wore a shabby, colorless suit, and from under his booth, the toes of a pair of polished wingtips jutted out. I approached and noticed how worn the wood was. How faded the sign. How long had he been doing this? Who was he, really? I didn't know what to say or where to start. My chest was aching with the same guilt it had carried for months, and the pulse of my heart had quickened to an erratic rhythm. Urgent and desperate, like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. But before I could calm myself enough to speak, the man reached out and beckoned for me to take his hand. The moment our hands touched, everything slipped away except for the feeling of his dry, waxy skin against mine. And then, my mind was bursting with memories. Not just the memory of my decision, but all of the paths that could have been. I couldn't make sense of any of them. There was too much going on. All I could discern were the millions, no trillions, of possibilities branching outward, shimmering like frayed threads of reality. The man who sold second chances did not have to ask me what I wanted. He knew. He had felt it in me long before I arrived. The gnawing, marrow-deep ache of regret. The weight of a mistake that had been festering like an open wound that refused to heal. And he was showing me that it didn't have to be so. Just as I thought the overwhelming rush of possibilities was going to make my head explode. A voice, his voice, unfolded inside of my skull like paper being peeled away. "Are you sure?" he said. "Knowledge is free, but second chances are costly." There wasn't an ounce of hesitation in my nod. Blank. Abruptly, our hands disconnected, and I knew I had made a horrible mistake. I started to notice things about him I hadn't noticed before. His suit didn't fit him, but not in any way that made sense. It seemed as though it wasn't meant for the body beneath it, too loose in places that should have hugged him, too tight where there should have been space. And I swear as I stared, it shifted, the fabric rippling like it was breathing. His tie hung too low, too thin. Its texture wasn't silky, but more like something wet, something living, and it writhed when he moved. The buttons were all wrong, too, mismatched in size and shape. And when he moved, they didn't catch the light like normal metal, they absorbed it. As if each one were a tiny, sightless eye. And that's when I realized, the man who sold second chances was no man at all. Not really. He wore the shape of a man, long-limbed, draped in an ill-fitting suit that moved against his frame like it was trying to swallow him whole. His fingers were too long, jointed in the wrong places, the knuckles swollen and bulbous, flexing under pale, purple-veined skin. His face was wrong, a stretched, waxen mockery of human skin with a too-wide mouth that unfolded like a wound. Inside, his teeth looked like splintered bone, frayed at the edges, as if he had been chewing on something he shouldn't have, something still alive. And his eyes, God, his eyes, they weren't where they should be. They drifted, sliding too far apart or pressing too close together, like they were never meant to stay in one place. My racing thoughts that were trying to make sense of the grotesque thing that had been revealed to me were interrupted by a sound. No, a sensation, a whisper that burrowed under my skin, an ache in my teeth, a shudder that reached the marrow in my bones. The man was not speaking in words. He was unraveling them, like an old tape playing backward, filling the air with the sense that the price for what I had just agreed to would be far more than I had bargained for. And there was always a price. Blank. The man who sold second chances doesn't work like a genie, granting wishes for his freedom from the lamp, nor is he like the devil at the crossroads, dealing a way out as the consequence of an impossible trade. No, the man who sold second chances promises a fair price. And his gifts are neither miracles nor curses. They are something far more unnatural, something that feels like time itself shuddering, unraveling, stitching itself back together in ways it was never meant to. Money meant nothing to him. What he wanted was regret, sorrow, mistakes, and so, when he reached out his veined, leathery hands to clasp mine too gently, too intimately, he took. Now, my regret had teeth. What had once sat in my chest like a stone lodged too deep, pressing against my lungs, making every breath feel shallow, unearned, was now gnashing, gnawing, devouring me, driven by a hunger that could never be sated. It was tearing at my insides like a starving animal, strings of saliva stretching between its jagged, restless fangs, mindlessly consuming whatever was caught between them. The hole inside of me grew wider and the world around me felt a little more wrong with each passing second. And then there was nothing. This was almost worse than the unnatural, insatiable guilt. Now, there was a tension left behind, a coil in its jaw as it waited, anticipating the next bite. This pause in feeling left my thoughts twitching, as if stopping the contrition I had become accustomed to was more unbearable than the act of feeling it itself. I snapped back to reality, finally able to focus my vision for the first time in what felt like hours, only to see that I was home. Checking my phone, I confirmed it was just after midnight on August 19th, and I noticed a text from Emily. "Did you do the summer reading? Class starts in 2 days and there's no way I'm going to finish. I was hoping to borrow your notes. Sent 20 minutes ago." My second chance had been granted. But what was a fair price for the life of my friend? The past has been rewritten seamlessly. The guilt that had found a home in my chest was gone. But deep down, I knew it wasn't free. Had allowing the man to feed on my misery been enough? That didn't feel right. The only thing that felt fair was a life for a life. I hurriedly opened up my laptop and searched missing persons plus March plus Banridge, ME, and found what I was looking for, a series of articles that had once been about Emily. Local woman goes missing after night out. The search is on for missing woman. Missing persons case goes cold. But the headlines had changed. Now, the face of another woman is staring back at me from the flyers splashed across every web page. Emily was meant to die that night, but by undoing fate, I doomed someone else to take on her final moments instead. My mistake never happened, but someone else paid the price for me. Another woman walked home alone in Emily's place. I searched the woman's name, hoping to find out something about her that would make me feel better about my decision. She was a teacher, a new mother, someone's wife, someone's friend, just like Emily had been mine. I was going to be sick. I ran to the bathroom and retched, clearing my stomach of its contents. Bile burning my throat, I splashed water on my face and looked in the mirror. And a scream ripped from my lungs. It wasn't my reflection staring at me. It was hers, the woman who took Emily's place. She was staring, hollow-eyed, lips moving without sound. I could only just barely make out what she was trying to communicate. Was it worth it? And that's when I realized why the man who sold second chances appears when there are no stars. When the sky is devoid of all light, it's not so that people could look towards their second chances with hope. It was so that when you paid, your grief had nowhere to go. It was so that when your second chance was granted, you'd be left with nothing inside but an even deeper guilt. A depth so dark, so hollow, it felt like looking into a hole dug too deep, a hole that had no bottom, and on that, he could feast. Second chances are not given, they're taken, stolen, carved from the bones of time itself. And the man who sells them will always be there for those who need them most.